Coming up in this video, extrasensory perception types. This is part of our mediumship development training. So what is ESP, extrasensory perception? What is that? What does extrasensory perception even mean? And what are some different types?
In this video, we're going to go into the meaning and definition with some examples. And if you have any questions as we go relating to the topic of this video, drop them in the comments.
Drop them in the comments.
We do have an offer at the end to take your metaphysical business from basic to bodacious, but only if it works for you. For those of you that are just getting to know us, I'm Heather.
And I'm David.
From
ZenRoseGarden.com.
I'm going to get a little nerdy today, just to let you know.
Gonna get nerdy.
Russell Targ is a physicist that worked for the CIA for about 23 years, I think. I don't have that exact number. With a team of physicists who trained abilities of Psi, which is basically the study of psychic abilities.
PSI. And side note, I see what I did there. Psi, side note.
That's
anyway, it is also the 23rd letter of the Greek alphabet.
But in order to solve cases, they studied Psi as kind of and they developed the abilities to kind of a high level, and they had an incredibly high rate of success.
These were not psychics, okay?
Right.
These were physicists. I know it's spelled similar, but they're different, who developed the techniques of psychic ability like remote viewing and telepathy, and actually found that it was really easy to do even for normal people.
So when we see people repeat stuff other people said, like when I'm watching YouTube videos about people that are on both extremes of is it real, I'm like, you do some research. I see people trying to be sciencey, like very sciencey, like there's no evidence, there's no studies, but there is a lot of evidence and studies that physicists have done and parapsychologists that is out there. And so I see kind of a lot of these people on the YouTubes going, but there's no evidence.
On the YouTube?
Except for believers, but just the believers, like believers are all woogie fairy people, without ever actually using the scientific method themselves. I have to roll my eyes at that because when I was a kid in the 1970s, my parents would drop me off at the library, which was my favorite place. And I would grab every book that I could about what the heck was going on with these extrasensory things I was experiencing. My dad understood it. He was also a scientist and he worked for NASA.
Right.
So not a woojie mystical guy, but very mystical at the same time. So I find that the books on this shelf today, as you go to the library and on Amazon, are very different from the books that were there in the library at that time in the 70s. There were books, the more books about Psi and psychic abilities were more about parapsychology and people that were doing studies, and they didn't have all the fluff that you find today. They were just a lot of studies and exercises and, graphs and stuff, which was more up my alley. And for those of you that live in Las Vegas, that old library now stands in the place where Zappo's backyard is downtown. So,
kind of fun.
All
right, little side note. 2,000 years ago, Buddhist philosophers actually theorized, because of the phenomena that they observed, that we are quite possibly non-local beings, okay, with a non-local awareness that is independent of space and time. So 2,000 years ago, they were thinking about some of the things that today's physicists are now playing and experimenting and evolving into.
And this is what I'm talking about when I see people going to the extreme of it's all fake, because people have been studying this stuff for thousands of
legitimate people,
not
fake people,
not just your bookstore psychic, right? So not that there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying you can't base all the research on just the people that, anyway, expand your mind is what I'm telling you. I heard CIA researcher physicist Russell Targ say recently that what was considered parapsychology yesterday, as in the time I was at the library in the 1970s looking up books, are things that physicists are now studying today.
And some ESP types are remote viewing, psychometry, precognition, basically any of the psychic senses that you're aware of or that you may have heard about or Googled, including telepathy. And we're going to get into some of these more deep today.
They had to bring a control subject in for a while, and so they got their friend who was an artist that came in, and they were like, we need a control subject, so they would give her, control experiments to do, and she would actually tap in and draw pictures of things that they were like in the next room or across a thing or in another state that they were testing as a control, and they weren't expecting that to happen. It's just that she got out of her way and she would draw things that were, remote viewed. She would remote view, and she really didn't consider herself a psychic at all.
Normal people with normal senses could also do this.
Yeah.
In controlled experiments. Scientific method
applied.
Galore, right.
A long time ago, 1970s, 1960s.
Now it's time. Now it's time for the good stuff.
Tip number one.
Talk about some simple ESP.
ESP basically means...
First, define the thing.
Extrasensory perception.
The perception beyond your normal senses.
This was a phrase that was coined in the 70s as kind of a general catch-all phrase for all of your extra senses. Well, now, studies have gone forward, and I was reading an article in Scientific America that was talking about we have 40 plus senses. So we sense on very, very specific and micro levels all the time, and all of these senses are always engaged. So who's to say where the borderline between normal senses and psychic senses begins?
A couple of those senses, just to let you know, are the passing of time. You've also got senses that can tell elevation and speed that you're going. Those are in addition to our normal 5 senses.
Let's talk about telepathy a little bit, because I want to kind of get down, because that's kind of the one we think of as very basic, right? So telepathy at its simplest explanation is mind-to-mind communication, either between two living beings or a living being and a spirit.
Non-living being.
If you want to go into mediumship, it would be that, right.
Right, but parapsychologists have theorized that communication may not always be, strictly speaking, telepathy. And really, by the time the signal gets to the brain, in the form of telepathy, it is for the most part impossible to know, and doesn't really matter, right? As long as the answer is the answer.
One of the theories is that you're picking it up in different senses, maybe through psychometry or some other sense, and by the time it gets to your brain, it might appear like telepathy when actually it's some other sense. But does it matter if the information you're getting is what you need? So information can arrive through many different senses and be sent through signal pathways. Told you we're going to get nerdy today. And pop into the mind in the same way that telepathy does.
Right.
Okay.
For instance, information that may be picked up through touch and translated into the brain can sometimes feel like telepathy, but by definition actually isn't.
But it kind of actually is. So some of these pathways may not be, by the strictest sense, psychic. Things like subliminal perception, which is where you are picking up information all the time that you're not consciously aware of, that gets dropped into your conscious mind. That would be an example of subliminal perception.
Right.
But I like to think of senses as just senses.
Right.
And for me, like I said, a lot of my study about this stuff when I was a kid was really from the field of parapsychology. It wasn't from the field of New Age and spiritual blah and metaphysics, because that's not the stuff you found in the library at the time.
Right.
Now it is.
So it makes it much easier to let go when you just go from macro to micro to everything in between. It makes it much easier to let go instead of trying to figure out all of the things, and just play with it. Also, by letting go, you improve your abilities this way, rather than trying to micromanage and categorize and name every single thing. Sense it, send it, figure it out later.
Send it. So basically, you are a whole sensing instrument. And when we try to compartmentalize our senses or ourselves, we're not making as good of a use as our senses as we could.
Or as fast of an improvement.
The second nerdy tip for
Number
the
2.
day.
Decision augmentation theory. Okay, so in the world of parapsychology, a current popular theory is that most ESP, or extrasensory perception, is actually precognition. Okay, and it kind of makes sense when you look at it from an animal instinct and subliminal primal awareness kind of perspective, from perception of the mind. It kind of makes sense.
So D.H.T. theory,
Or
decision
that theory.
is that we may obtain information through types of cognition which are integrated non-consciously and amplifies decision making. So the theory is that we receive this information on a non-conscious level that amplifies our decision making, which could be in the positive or in the negative, just depending on an individual's mental and emotional maturity.
So, of course, the goal would be then to achieve a better awareness and build a better bridge between that subconscious awareness and your conscious decision making. Now it's poll time.
If you had a choice, which gift would you want to have on lock? The ability to have telepathy whenever you wanted it, or levitation? Which one would you want? Just curious. We want to know. Inquiring minds want to know.
I want teleportation personally, but that's
not on the list.
I
There's
know.
2 choices and that's it. Let's get into tip number 3, making telepathy natural, because we want to be able to use our gifts in a natural, easy way and not pile all sorts of crazy stuff on top of it.
Right. Making telepathy natural. How do you increase your awareness and the gift of telepathy?
As the Buddhists kind of already told us 2,000 years ago, give up your desire to judge things and name things and just describe and observe what you sense. And I think that's, in a nutshell, the simplest way to do it. It's when we try to make sense of it before we're done receiving or observing the information, that it takes us in a whole different direction.
Yeah, when you start going into your conscious, logical mind with things, you start closing off that bridge, okay? So this is not a new concept. This is not a new thing. This is not some new age philosophy, but this was said like Buddhist philosophers more than a few thousand, like 2,000 plus years ago. So it's not new.
It's not new, and this is how that team of physicists that worked for the CIA achieved a really high level of accuracy in their remote viewing experiments. In that 23-ish years, that the CIA had that program, and they simply just got out of the way of the information.
Absolutely. So once you strip away the extra fluff, all the BS out there, right? The temptation to name everything, the technique itself actually becomes very natural and very easy.
One of the things that Russell Targ said that I thought was really interesting, that I kind of believe myself, because I think these are functions of our mind, said that extrasensory abilities are not this sacred thing that is all mystical. Yes, it's mystical and it's mysterious, but they're actually quite easy to access if you stop trying to name the thing, as the Buddhists kind of already figured out, right?
There it is.
Do the thing.
Now it is time for that offer to take your metaphysical business from basic to bodacious, but only if it works for you.
We've learned that self-growth and developing your superpowers go together like sushi, Sapporo, and sake.
And that is why we created our signature subscription membership, Zen Ed Academy,
where the science of self-growth meets the magic of mysticism.
So what do you need to do to get into the Academy and become part of that revolution? All the info down below. If you like this video, hit that like button. And for more mind-hacking pro tips,
be sure to subscribe.
And clickety-click that bell to turn notifications on.
So you're the first to know
when we drop a new video.
Or go live.
And we know that time is a valuable and precious resource, and the fact that you guys have chosen to spend that with us, we absolutely appreciate that. But most importantly, leveling up your skills, taking your life and your business to a whole new level, we absolutely honor and appreciate that even more. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
See you in the next video.